Hey guys, in this video I'm going to talk about having too many or maybe not enough cameras. So I'm Daniel Norton, photographer here in New York, and I make videos like this about gear, about philosophy, about all kinds of stuff. So if you're interested, please subscribe. So this thought came up as I was packing up some gear. I don't know if we can ever have enough bags either. That could be another video in and of itself, but there's two points I want to make here. So if you're going to work as a professional photographer, or you're going to work professionally, I should say, you probably need to have some kind of a backup system. So I guess there's some cases where you could get away without having it. Let's say that you shoot on your own time and just have to deliver, and there's enough area to get a rental, let's say if something were to go wrong. But if you're, a portrait photographer, a wedding photographer, any kind of photographer that needs to be on location or in the studio, and you're working with something that's time sensitive, you need to make sure that if something goes down, you have a backup. So this is kind of the most basic level of this, how many cameras do we need thing. There's another angle to this as well that we'll talk about, which is just different types of cameras. But so if my thought would be this: if you're starting out and shooting and you're just doing test shoots or whatever, and you have a small budget, yeah, having one camera is probably fine. The day that you start to make money with it or want to make money, I definitely would have a backup. And what you could do, and this is what I did for a long time back in the days of film, because I shot a lot of 35 millimeter for like my portfolio and for model agencies where it wasn't like super important, and I had 2 camera bodies, and then eventually 3. But when I did jobs, like real jobs, I would rent a medium format camera because I didn't own one. They were expensive at first. Then I bought one, and well, I would rent 2, I should say. And then I bought one, and even then, when I owned one, I still always rented a second camera as a backup because, again, you can't be there in the middle of the catalog and all of a sudden your camera dies on you. You need to have the backup camera. So this is what I recommend for people that are just starting. Find a local place that rents stuff and rent a secondary camera when you go out on assignment. Even if you never use it. In fact, it's a good way to try things because you could rent a better camera than you have and use that as the main camera, or you could rent the same camera as a backup, or depending on the camera you have, you might even be able to rent one level down camera just so you have it, which is the other way to look at this. Don't necessarily, I know people like sell their cameras and they whatever. You might not want to sell your camera right away when you upgrade because you might want to use your old camera as a backup. Because again, it's better to have fewer megapixels and a slower camera or whatever than not being able to achieve the job at all. So I think that's pretty common practice among professionals. Usually when we upgrade cameras, we keep the one generation back and as the backup, unless you're in a good enough position where you can buy, at least 2 of the modern ones and then sell. Some people do that. But I think it's pretty common that people would use one camera back. There's also another reason to do it that way, even if you were starting from scratch. Let's say that you've got, I don't know all the cameras, but let's say you're shooting whatever, Canon, and you've got a 5D, which is a full frame camera, and whatever the level camera down from that, 60, no, I think, whatever. There's APS, right? Those are generally less expensive, but all your full frame lenses will fit on that APS camera. And if you put them on that camera, you actually extend your reach, right? You get a more cropped field of view, which, could be useful. So sometimes it's a good idea just to buy 2 cameras for that reason, and still it can act as your backup. You use your APS camera for the backup, but you also use it when you need the longer reach. So it gives 2 purposes to it. Having 2 matching cameras is great because same batteries, everything's the same in your hand. But oftentimes having 2 cameras that are slightly different is also beneficial, which is often the way that I operated. I very rarely had 2 of the exact same camera because I always felt like each camera has its own personality, and I would switch them up as they go. So generally, other than in my case, I was very different because I usually had some kind of DSLR, and then I would have, like my Leica, or a medium format camera, because I felt like that those cameras were so different that I would actually use them both on the job, and I could switch back and forth as needed. They weren't really a true backup, and it does make for more gear to carry because you can't carry just like, one set of lenses. Because, even though you might say, well, you need 2, you need backup lenses, you don't need the exact backups. Generally, the way that I would operate that way is I would get some zooms that cover your ranges, and then get a couple of primes that are kind of where you want them to be, so that, let's say, for instance, you have a 24-70 that work with all the time, you might throw like a 50 in your bag. That's going to give you enough coverage that if one of those lenses goes down, you can probably still do mostly what you were going to do you know, with the remaining lens. You know, in fact, I kind of learned that from being a photo assistant. I used to work for this guy, and he was an Nikon shooter in the film days, and he had the whatever it was, the wide zoom, and then he had the middle zoom, like 24-70 or whatever, and then he had the long zoom, and he would always, which of course to me who had like almost no equipment, I was always like, well, he would always take those out and like look through them. It was the very, very first thing he ever did. And then once he got the shot framed it the way he wanted, he would look at the lens, see the focal length it was, and then he would take the zoom off and give it back to us and then ask for that prime. And he would always shoot with the primes. Almost never did he shoot with the zoom unless there was a shot where things were moving and you really had to use a zoom to kind of zoom in and out, which wasn't that often. And I thought it was a unique way to look, because it was like, wow, you're using a $2,000 lens just to set up your shot. But you know what, in that case, sometimes it's worth it. And also that zoom lens acts as a backup. So it's a way to look at things. So along with this kind of thought process too, trying to manipulate the camera to go down, there we go. Along with this thought process too is this idea that that sometimes we want different cameras for different things. And of course I was thinking about this too because I'm using a new camera in these last few videos. Using the Osmo, which is the little pocket camera. And I had been using the Mevo for this, and also for like my Adorama stuff I use Sony's. You know, I use like actual full-size DSLRs with a different system. And I think I've done videos about this before. And it's really interesting because each camera has its own style and its own kind of ways that it works and things that it works for. And I'm finding like for this one, you know, what I'm doing here, and the reason why I'm switched to this versus the Mevo, is that the Osmo itself for getting B-roll and stuff is really great. So I just want to get more use out of that. Besides, I mean, for the vlogging, it's, you know, it is what it is. But if I was doing a vlog like this and I wanted to say, oh, and then over there I could also do B-roll with this camera and put it together. You know, that's my ultimate goal. So I'm kind of breaking this in. So hopefully you guys will see some more dynamic videos as we go. But again, it's a different camera that does the same thing. So I have the Mevo, right, which I shoot with, and I do these with. The Mevo is great because you can live stream with it, even though I don't usually live stream these. And it does a similar thing. I can put it on a tripod and record just like I'm doing now. And I can make these vlogs and it's awesome, right? So I've got those two cameras. I could have bought a second Mevo, but I was like, well, let me get something different because that's going to add to my resource. It's not as good at some things, in my opinion. It's not, and it's better at other things. You know, you wouldn't walk around with a Mevo in your hand. And this is not, you know, because of certain features, it can't do the punching and stuff that the Mevo does. It's not exactly like if I was doing a two-person shot, you know, it wouldn't be like I could do the same thing with the Mevo punching in, and I can't live stream with it. So, you know, each camera's got their benefits. And I think that's kind of what I was thinking when I was thinking about this video. I was thinking, you know, I've got probably way too many cameras, and each one has its point. You know, I don't really have two cameras that are really the same. I don't have it. Actually, I don't have two cameras that are, that's not, yeah, no, it's true. I don't have two cameras that are exactly the same. Each one is a little different, and I use them for different stuff. And people sometimes say, like, they'll pick out on one video and they'll be like, oh, I see that you're shooting with the Nikon. So when did you switch? I never switched, you know. I've always used lots of different brands. I think each one has their own unique feel, their own unique kind of benefits. And, you know, some of them, you know, have drawbacks, and this is the reason why we don't use it, you know. I still have the Canon that I used to use a lot, which is the 1D, 1X, whatever it is, the D1X. I used to have the Nikon that I've been using lately. I use the Hasselblad. I use the Fuji, which I love. I love the Leica. I love my Leica. I don't use the Leica for these videos, even though it's like my favorite camera, because I can't tether with the Leica that I have, so it doesn't really work well for these videos. But I love my Leica, and I shoot with it a bunch when I'm off just shooting. So each camera has its own kind of benefit, and each camera is used for different things. So I mean, how many do we need? Who knows, right? A million cameras, right? I think you can overwhelm yourself. I mean, I obviously do something that's different than what maybe a lot of people do, because not only do I make photos, I also make video and video of myself making photos. So I can't just use the one camera for everything. I have to always have additional equipment for that. Though the Sonys are very capable of shooting the video, which I use them for, and I can shoot stills with them if I needed to. The Canon, the Nikon, they both shoot video and stills. So I could theoretically do a lot of what I do with all those cameras. But at the same time, instead of setting up a big camera over here with DSLR, I have this Osmo, which is tiny. I can't show you because I'm using it in the video. Well, this is the case for it. I have this plugged into my phone with a little tiny lavalier mic system, you know, and this literally can fit in my back pocket. So I can go out and do, you know, video production anywhere. And what it does is it makes me carry it with me. And carrying it with me will make me use it more, and that's kind of the advantage of this particular system. The Sonys, they've got, I can put lenses on them, so they're better there. There's like a lot more features. They're on some level they're easier to use, but I don't carry them around because I don't really shoot a lot of video of myself, outside the studio with those because they're bigger and I don't want to carry them around. I'm already carrying a camera to shoot stills with, so I don't want to carry that. And of course, lately I've been using that Nikon, which I really love, and it is small because it's mirrorless, but I can't shoot video of myself with it when I'm using it as a stills camera. So, it doesn't become a video camera for me. So I need at least two cameras, one to video myself and one to shoot. What you need is maybe is different. You might just want two cameras because they have two different lenses on it. I've seen people do that too, where like, let's say you have a 50 and an 85, you put one on each camera body and you just switch back and forth instead of switching lenses. You just grab the different body. This was very common actually in the days of film. We would literally just marry a lens to a body because the people didn't, I'm not gonna say they were cheaper because camera bodies were actually, they were cheaper in a certain sense, but like a prosumer camera back then was like, $1,000, which is probably what the one costs now, right around there. In an expensive camera, like, I think the Nikon F5 was the last one they came up. Well, the Canon didn't have 6 out but the F5 was like $2,500-$2,600, which is, it's a film camera. And at the time, digital cameras were out at that point. So, it's not like they were cheap, but we had multiple bodies. It was just considered something that you did as film cameras. Because also because, I've told this story before, but it's really interesting. I used to work for a guy and he used to use 5 Nikons. And I always thought that was overkill until we did a job that was a month long. And what we used to do is we'd have to keep track of it and we'd shoot, each one was numbered. And each roll of film he would shoot, we never shot less than like 10, 15 rolls of film on a setup. So each roll of film you'd mark which camera it came out of, whatever, blah, blah, blah. And we shot through this whole thing. It turned out that one of the cameras actually screwed up and we didn't know. It was like an issue with the shutter being slightly slow or something. We never noticed it the whole time, but when we got every roll of film from that camera, from that entire job, was ruined. And we would have never known until we got the film back, which means if he only, let's say, had 2 cameras, half his film would have been ruined. But the fact that he had 5, it was only 20%, which is still a lot, but hey, you know what? It made it work. With digital, clearly we can see if there's a problem, so having just 2 is probably enough, but you want to have cameras for exactly that reason. You never know when things are going wrong. And if you're a location shooter and you're traveling and stuff, it's even worse to be able to get your hands on things. So what I would say is before you put yourself out there as a pro and start collecting money on anything that's serious, at least have the resource to get a backup camera, even if it's a rental camera or it's your old camera you haven't used in 2 years. Dust it off, make sure it works on some level so that you can get those shots if you need to. So how many cameras do you have? Like, I'm curious what people, and by the way, we're just talking about modern cameras here. If I start throwing in all the different weird film cameras I have, yeah, I might have to go to some kind of support group for that. But yeah, how many cameras do you guys use? Do you mostly have 1 camera or 2 cameras? Do you carry backup cameras with you all the time? How do you guys do this? I'd be curious to know. If you haven't already, please subscribe, and I'll see you next time.